I have realized that there are two groups of people. There are those who go all out for Christmas, and they cover their entire house with lights, and they have a huge nativity scene and a blow-up Santa all on the outside of their house. And then the second group, which I'm in, are those that are way too lazy to do all that, and so they love to drive around and look at those who go all out for Christmas. Speaking of those who go all out for Christmas, how many of you have a nativity set either on the inside or outside of your house? The nativity is a picture of the original Christmas. And you probably know all the characters in nativity. You have baby Jesus here in the center, and then you have Mary and Joseph, and then you have the shepherds, which we only have one shepherd because Fisher-Price only sent us one shepherd. But the shepherds, they were the first to receive the announcement of the coming of Jesus. And they were actually the least likely to receive the announcement because they were considered unclean and outsiders, which I think is the point of Christmas, that Jesus is for everyone. And then you have the wise men, that with the wise men, the story says that there are 3 of them, but we really don't know if there were 3 or 33. We only know that there were 3 gifts that they brought: frankincense, gold, and myrrh. Now, what's interesting about the wise men is that they were not a part of the original manger scene. I hate to burst your Christmas bubble. They actually brought their gifts to Jesus when he was 2 years old, but they look better in the scene, so we're going to keep them in there. But then you have the barnyard animals. And most of us, we know the Christmas story. And the Christmas story, Mary and Joseph, they went to Bethlehem because they had to register for the census, but there was no room in the inn. And so as a result, they had to stay in a barn filled with animals. It's why Jesus was put in a manger. The manger was the feeding trough for these animals. The Nativity has been around for a really long time. In fact, the first one is dated around 1223 AD. St. Francis of Assisi actually created the first Nativity. He built this manger, and then he put 2 live animals around it. He put an ox and a donkey, and then he invited the entire town to come and see. As they were there, he preached to them about the babe of Bethlehem. Well, now you see them everywhere. You see them on Christmas cards and on mantles and on lawns. The Nativity not only symbolizes the story of Christmas, it also symbolizes your story as well. Each of the pieces of the Nativity can represent pieces in your life. And as we're going to see, you can have the right pieces, but you can't have the right pieces in the wrong place. You see, you have to have Jesus at the center. Well, for all of us, we have something at the center, or that is the focal point of our life. You know, in this statement, if only I had blank, then I would be happy, or then I'd be content, then I'd be fulfilled. Whatever you fill in that blank, that's your center. That's your focal point. If you've ever thought, I believe in Jesus, I've been to church, I'm even taking part in Christmas Eve service right now, but something is not working right in your life, could it be that your life is not set up right? Could it be that Jesus is in the picture, but he's either been removed from the center or he's never been in the center? Some of us, we have the shepherds in the center. And for the shepherds, their job defined them. Their job was the center of their life. And this is true for many of us. You know, think about when we meet someone new, what's one of the first questions they ask? What do you do? Yeah, partly because we don't know what else to say. And the other part is we often equate what we do with who we are. Now, this is always really awkward for me. I'll be really honest with you. When I tell someone I'm a pastor, it is the ultimate conversation killer. And so here's what I've done. I've come up with a different line. Someone will say, hey, what do you do? And I say, well, I work for a nonprofit, kind of hoping they won't ask what or where. But then if it gets to the point where I tell them that I'm a pastor, just like clockwork. I can just begin to see them rehearsing in their mind our conversation. And it's like they're thinking about, okay, did I say anything appropriate or did I swear? As if I've never sworn before in my life. I love what I do for a living. And I have to fight against this because of just my personality style. But what I do is not my identity. And maybe what you do has become your identity. And you'll say things like, well, I'm just working hard. I'm trying to get ahead. I'm trying to provide for my family. Listen, there is nothing wrong with working hard. In fact, the Apostle Paul talks about that whatever we do, we should work at it as if we are working for God. However, our job and our career shouldn't be at the center. You know, for some, we put the wise men at the center. And the wise men, they were highly educated. These were political advisors to the king. And so they were very, very wealthy and very, very powerful. Now, the wise men, they represent power and influence and knowledge and wealth. I've never heard anybody say to me, Mark, I'm putting all my hope in power and wealth. But the reality is, many of us live our lives as if that's the most important thing. You know, money is not a bad thing. But the New Testament writers warn us about putting our hope in money because it is so uncertain, as the last year has reminded us of. You know, money and status, those are really good things. However, they shouldn't be at the center. Well, what about this one? What about Mary and Joseph? Now, Mary and Joseph, they represent family. They represent all the relationships in our life. They represent our marriages and our kids. I mean, think about what we say. We even say family first. And so what do? We move them into the center. If you're single, you might be tempted to think, well, if I just find the right person, then I'll be happy. And all the married couples just kind of nod their head, no, you won't. What often happens is then we get married, and then that person doesn't make us as happy as we expected them to, and then we begin to think, well, I must have married the wrong person. But the reality is you didn't marry the wrong person. You just placed impossible expectations on them because you're trying to fill a void that only God can fill. You know, maybe this represents your kids. Do you know what the number one fear every parent has? And I'm a parent, and so I have this fear. The number one fear? That we're going to screw up our kids. And so in that fear of us screwing up our kids, we often overcompensate. And so as a result, everything centers around them and their activities. But there's very little room for the spiritual life. There's very little room for going to church. See, Jesus might be in the picture. He's just not in the center. Family ought to be a priority. However, it's not meant to be in the center. Last one. Some of us put these guys in the center. Yeah, we put our animals in the center. Now, did you know that we spent over $70 billion on pets last year? Now, you say, my pet's not at the center. Listen, I have seen your Instagram pictures. Your dog and your cat are definitely in the center. You know, for some of us, we would love to have a nativity that looks like this. Now, let's just say you don't have pets, or let's just say your pets aren't at the center. These represent all the things that we consider important in our lives. This is our favorite sports teams. This is this hobby that we're fanatical about. This is working out. These are vacation homes. Listen, again, those are all really, really good things. We just shouldn't put these at the center of our life. I mean, you think about your favorite sports team, and then all of a sudden, you know what happens. Eventually, they disappoint. I mean, just think about if you're from Illinois. Now, Bear fans, let me just apologize. I can say that because I'm a Steeler fan, God's team, and here we were, 11-0, and I'm thinking, this is our year, but now things are starting to crumble, and so is my hope with it. You see, these things, they represent stuff that matter more than they are meant to matter in our lives. So what do? Well, we have to start to reorder our lives. Relationships, they are very important. Our career, our jobs, they're meant to bring fulfillment into our lives. You know, money, there's nothing wrong with money as long as it doesn't have you. You see, when our life is not set up right, it doesn't work right. But when our life is set up right, not only does it look right, it works right. And it's set up right when Jesus is at the center. The characters in the Christmas story, they got this right. Let's look at the shepherds. Remember the shepherds? They were the ones who were the first to hear the announcement of the coming of Jesus. Here's how Luke records their experience. Here's what Luke says. It says, when the angels had left them and gone into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, let's go to Bethlehem and see this thing that has happened, which the Lord has told us about. So they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and the baby, who was lying in the manger. When they had seen him, they spread the word concerning what had been told them about this child. And all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds said to them. And so the shepherds, they left their sheep to go and see Jesus. They risked losing their job to hear about this good news of great joy for all people. Well, let's look at the wise men. Matthew records their experience. Here's what Matthew says. They went on their way, and the star they had seen when it rose went ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshiped him. And so here were these advisors to the king. With all their wealth and with all their status, they go into this neighborhood that they had probably never thought they would ever go to. They go into this house and they see this 2-year-old baby, and what's their response? They bow down and worship him. When you realize who Jesus really is, that's the only appropriate response. We have 4 accounts of the life of Jesus in the Bible: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Matthew and Luke, who we just read from, they give details of the birth of Jesus. John, on the other hand, he gives the significance of the birth of Jesus. In fact, if you're not a church person or you're really unsure of Jesus or not a Bible person, you should read one of these accounts, because these accounts are all written within 30 years of when Jesus walked the earth, which makes them very reliable sources. Well, tradition tells us that after the resurrection, that John took care of Mary, the mother of Jesus. And so if anybody knew the story of the birth of Jesus, it was John. So here's what John writes about Jesus, and I want you to keep this in mind. John spent 3 years walking closely with Jesus. And so here's what John writes. Through him, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that had been made. And so John makes this huge statement. Baby Jesus was actually Creator Jesus. He says, in him was life. And this idea of life he's talking about is life as God intended it to be. He says, in him was this kind of life. And that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. If you want to make sense of everything in your life, you turn to the one who created it, because he knows. Everything finds purpose in and through Jesus. You see, when Jesus is put in the center of our lives, it changes everything, because it's only there that we discover life as God intended it to be.
We were very, very involved with the church growing up, but really, looking back at it, I wasn't really invested, I would say, in my early 20s in church. I kind of just got focused on other areas of life. Me and her, we were together for a while, and and then we found out that she was pregnant. I was terrified of what her folks would say. And it was like instantly we said it. It was like not like no thought, like, hey, like we love you guys. We are so excited. We're going to be grandparents. We're pumped. Like you let us know whatever you need. We'll be down there. We'll help you every step of the way. And then we, call, my side of the family and tell them the news. And, all you heard was a click of the phone hanging up. In my head, I was like, everything was flipped. When the church people found it inconvenient or where I didn't fit the narrative, like, you're out. And, I'd say like I was kind of lukewarm my whole life, but that's like the first time I was really 2 feet out. Like I was like, no, I don't get the whole church thing. Like it didn't make sense. I was done. Family, church, friends, none of it. Like I'm going to fight through this. I'm going to get through it on my own and kind of do things my way. Like I had this goal, like in January, this is where I want to be. And I got there. And I'd say right after that's where things started to fall apart. Days at home became awful. But it was just a very slow, hard split for both of us. I couldn't fix it. And that's kind of where I started to go down to a really dark place. I just go lay in the bathtub in dark, pitch black, quiet apartment. And, I felt like my demons screaming at me, like nobody could ever love you, like she couldn't love you. Like, so who is ever going to love you? Like, who are you going to trust? Your family, your friends, everyone's gone. Like, who can you trust? You're just like a waste of space. And I ended up drinking a lot on the nights where I was alone and ended up getting thrown in jail for it. It's kind of where I started to realize, I've got to do something because how I'm living is not working. After that, I started church searching again. I didn't really know what I was looking for because like, it's weird to walk into a church when you simultaneously like despise it, but you want it to help you. One Sunday, you guys were talking about group links, and I was like, maybe I could get in a group. I was like super like apprehensive to even attend. So I show up, and I had to bring my son with me. I'm pretty sure that was the first time I'd ever brought my kid into the Ridge. And you guys were advertising, Ridge kids, like, just so you can focus on like the people around you, making fellowship, like, come put your kid, and I'm like, heck no, I'm not putting my kid in there. Like, screw that. So I'm like sitting there, I'm that guy, like, I got my little boy, I'm carrying him around, like checking out the groups, because like, I'm not putting my kid in there, I don't trust those people. I want to say it was about 10 feet that way, right there. And my son, you guys kept the stage there, he was sitting there, he was crawling over the place, and, super nice, judgmental. I'm like, okay, I could really vibe here. And they talked about praying us out, and I'll never forget, Tiffany, picks up my little baby boy in her arms, and it was like at that point, like I'd never prayed with my son, and like just to see them embrace that, like embrace my son like that, like, I felt God was holding me too, and like all those nights I laid there, like in this dark place, like it was like something just flipped. Like, nobody could ever love you. It's God saying, you left, I never did. Like, I always loved you. And like, nobody cares. Like, you're just a waste of space. No, like, you could have a place here. Like, these people care about you. And like, I don't want you to just go die. I want you to thrive. Like, I didn't really know what to make of it, but like, I felt God moving. At that moment in this room, like 3.5 going on 4 years ago, like I went from 2 feet out to 2 feet in, like, like this is what I'm looking for. I don't know what it is, but like, I know I need to be here. Finally finding that cornerstone in my life kind of slowly shaped everything else in life, just kind of fell into place. It doesn't happen in a day, but doing that over time, you start to it changes the way you think, the way you talk to people, the way you feel when you talk to people, just kind of finding that basic blueprint, and then everything else in life, your relationships, everything, it just kind of works out. You can come into church, and not have that cookie cutter perfect lifestyle, and, you can, God can still use you to make a difference and to lead. Something I would have never expected 4 years ago when I walked in here. Let
me ask you a question. What would your life look like if tomorrow you woke up and Jesus was at the center of your life? How would that change your dating relationship? You might be experiencing tension in your marriage right now. What if Jesus was put at the center? You might have this past year experienced a lot of fear and anxiety. What if Jesus was at the center? How might that change how you approach school? How might that change your parenting? What if Jesus were at the center? How might that change how you handle your finances? Here's something interesting about nativity scenes. When you go to different parts of the world, you will see the nativity scenes, but they will look very much like the culture that you're in. For example, in Ecuador, Mary and Joseph, they don't have head coverings like this. They actually wear sombreros, which I think is kind of fun. If you go to Uganda, you won't have this as a backdrop. You'll have a grass hut as a backdrop, and Mary and Joseph will look like they're from Africa. And what I love about that is that's what the message of Christmas is all about. That Jesus came into our world and He came for us, which means He can relate to our lives. And you have to decide not just if Jesus is going to be in the part of your life, that you have to decide to put Him at the center of it or put Him back at the center of your life. Look what our guy John wrote a few verses after the verses we just read. Here's what John writes. He says, "The true light that gives light to everyone, no matter where you've been, no matter what you've done, no matter what's been done to you, no matter what you believe or what you don't believe, you are included in the everyone." And so when I read that again, I want you just to insert your name. The true light that gives light to you was coming into the world. You see, Jesus is that true light that will shine light into the dark areas of our life, which for many of us, that's a little bit scary, that's a little bit uncomfortable. But when we allow Jesus to do that, two things will happen. One is we will experience the beauty of the love and grace of God in our life. And the second thing is we will begin to discover life as God intended it to be. Your life will never make sense until Jesus is at the center of it. You know, maybe you've never gone to church, or maybe you grew up going to church, but you've never surrendered your life to Jesus. You've never put Him at the center. Here's the thing. You have to invite Him in. Now, He could just kind of bulldoze His way in, but that's not how Jesus works. Rather, He stands outside the door of your heart and He knocks. He stands outside the door of your life and He knocks. And some of you, you know that because you know He's been knocking for months and for years, but you haven't let Him in. The reality is you have to open up your door and you have to let Him in. And I want to give you the opportunity to do that now. I want to give you the opportunity to open up the door of your heart and place your faith and trust in Jesus. And the way that we do that is I'm going to say a prayer, but my prayer doesn't save you. Jesus saves you. My prayer just serves as a guide for you. I ask you to bow your head and let's pray. Father, I recognize that I have tried all sorts of things at the center. I mean, I've tried relationships and I've tried to make them the center. I've tried career and status and stuff. I've tried to put them all at the center. But God, I know none of it just seems to work. None of it brings fulfillment. None of it brings peace. None of it brings happiness. Father, I realize that only You can do that. And so, Father, today, I place my faith and trust. I believe You sent Jesus and that He went to the cross dying for my sins and He rose from the dead. And because He rose from the dead, I know that I will as well someday be with You. Father, I thank You that I mattered so much to You, that You would come into my world and You would relate to my life. And Father, I thank You. It's all done because of Your love for me. And Father, I thank You that just doesn't stop here, I thank you that you have a plan and a purpose for me, life as it is intended to live. And it's only found, and I realize that, and it's only found through following you. Thank you, God, for allowing me to put you where you belong at the very center of my life. Pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, if you made that decision, we want to come alongside of you and help you in your faith journey. You see, making the decision is just the first part. There is more to come. And so here's what I want to encourage you to do. If you made that decision, I want you to text the word center to this number, 414-509-0339. That's 414-509-0339. And for the next 2 weeks, we will send you a daily devotion. And that daily devotion will be a short reading or a video. And what's great about this daily devotion is it's one thing to make the decision to put Jesus in the center, but the best is yet to come, because now you get to discover what it's like to live your life with Him at the center. Merry Christmas.